When Mark discovers his wife Claire's affair, his world is shattered, but instead of confronting her immediately, he meticulously plans a calculated and devastating revenge. With the help of a private investigator, Mark uncovers not only her lies but also a shocking betrayal tied to their family's future. As Claire struggles to salvage their crumbling marriage, Mark sets the stage for a reckoning she never sees coming. This is a gripping tale of love turned to betrayal, trust broken beyond repair, and the ultimate quest for justice in a relationship marred by deceit. Just when the story seems to reach its climax, a chilling revelation changes everything, leaving no one untouched. An unforgettable journey through heartbreak, resilience, and the unexpected power of revenge. It was a brisk autumn morning when my life began unraveling. The kind of day where the air feels electric, where the trees blaze with fiery reds and golds, yet all I could sense was a creeping chill. My wife, Claire, was bustling around the kitchen, her movements as seamless and graceful as ever. She smiled at me over her cup of coffee, the same smile that had once lit up my world. But that day, her smile felt hollow. Claire and I had been married for 10 years, a milestone I had once thought unbreakable. Together, we had built a life of laughter, love, and stability. Our home, nestled in a quiet suburban neighborhood, was a sanctuary where we raised our 2 children, Sam and Emily. I worked from home as a software consultant, juggling deadlines and video calls while Claire's career as a marketing executive kept her constantly on the move. "Big meeting tonight," she said over breakfast, sipping her coffee. "I might be late, so don't wait up." "Take your time," I replied. I meant it. I'd never been the overbearing type. Trust was the bedrock of our marriage, or so I thought. That trust began to crumble later that morning, when a single message on Claire's forgotten phone flipped my world upside down. It had been an ordinary moment. Claire had dashed back into the house after leaving her phone in the car. She had always been scatterbrained when it came to her belongings, a trait I found endearing. But today, the screen lit up just as I reached to grab my keys. "Miss you already, can't wait for our next getaway." The sender's name was Nick, a name I didn't recognize, and one that didn't belong in Claire's world. My breath caught. My hands trembled as I took a screenshot and quickly forwarded it to my email. Then, I replaced the phone exactly as it had been, feigning ignorance as she kissed me goodbye and left. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. My mind raced, conjuring 1,000 explanations that might absolve her, only to tear them apart moments later. I told myself it was nothing, a misunderstanding, a friend being playful. But my gut knew better. The warmth of her smile that morning now felt like a veil, a carefully constructed mask. For the rest of the day, I moved through my tasks like a man underwater. Emails blurred, deadlines felt distant. I couldn't shake the gnawing unease growing in my chest. When Claire texted me later to say she'd be late, I didn't respond. Instead, I began the first steps of my silent investigation. That night, after she had gone to bed, I sat in my dimly lit office. My hands hovered over the keyboard as I debated my next move. I could confront her, demand answers. But something in me hesitated. I wanted to be sure. I needed proof, not just suspicion. So, I began to dig. Her credit card statements were easy to access, we shared an account. It didn't take long to find discrepancies, charges for upscale restaurants I'd never heard of, boutique hotels, and a jewelry store in a city she claimed to have visited for work. The timeline matched her recent business trips, each receipt stacking up against her stories like a brick in a wall of lies. The more I uncovered, the harder it became to breathe. But the true gut punch came when I delved into her email account. She had a secondary address, one I'd never seen before, used exclusively to communicate with Nick. Their correspondence was nauseatingly intimate. Plans for secret getaways, confessions of love, and inside jokes painted a picture of a woman I no longer recognized. For days, I said nothing. I carried the weight of my discoveries in silence, watching Claire with a mix of disbelief and fury. How had I been so blind? How had she fooled me so completely? The breaking point came one evening when Claire came home late, her cheeks flushed, her smile radiant. She kissed me on the cheek as she passed, the faint scent of unfamiliar cologne trailing behind her. I clenched my fists, my nails biting into my palms. The walls of our home seemed to close in around me, the weight of her deception suffocating. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. I wasn't ready. Instead, I spent the next week laying the groundwork for what was to come. I hired a private investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Erica who specialized in uncovering secrets like Claire's. Within days, Erica provided photographic evidence of my wife and Nick together, dining at an upscale restaurant, holding hands, sharing a kiss that left no room for doubt. With proof in hand, my focus shifted. Confrontation was no longer enough. Claire had betrayed me, not just as a husband but as a father, a partner, a confidant. This wasn't about salvaging a broken marriage. This was about justice. About reclaiming the life she had stolen from me. I began planning my revenge, each step deliberate and precise. Claire thought she was in control, weaving her lies with the confidence of someone who believed they'd never be caught. But her web was about to unravel. The first act of my plan. A surprise vacation. Claire, I said one evening, my voice casual. How about we get away for a weekend? Just the two of us. She hesitated, her eyes flickering with something unreadable. That sounds wonderful, she said, her tone a little too eager. I smiled, masking the storm within. I'll take care of everything. Just leave it to me. And so, the stage was set. The weekend arrived quickly, and I prepared meticulously for the vacation that would change everything. Claire, for all her wit and charm, didn't suspect a thing. If anything, she seemed excited, her usual tension replaced with a rare warmth that almost made me forget the truth. Almost. We packed lightly. Claire wore her favorite travel outfit, a breezy blouse and jeans that hugged her in all the right places. She looked every bit the woman I had fallen in love with. But her beauty was a mask now, hiding the betrayal festering beneath. The destination was perfect, a luxury hotel nestled along a picturesque lakefront, the kind of place designed to rekindle love. I'd chosen it specifically because it was the same hotel where Claire and Nick had stayed during one of their secret trysts. She didn't realize that I knew this. I wanted her to feel the weight of her lies in a place she thought was her sanctuary. As we pulled up to the grand entrance, Claire sighed in delight. "This is beautiful," she said, reaching out to squeeze my hand. "Thank you for this, Mark." I nodded, forcing a smile. Anything for us. Check-in was seamless, and soon we were escorted to a suite with sweeping views of the water. Claire seemed genuinely happy as she unpacked, chatting about the activities we could do together. It almost made me question my plan, almost. But then I remembered the emails, the photos, the smug grin on Nick's face as he kissed my wife in broad daylight. Any hesitation evaporated. "Let's have dinner in the restaurant tonight," I suggested. "I heard the chef is incredible." Claire agreed, her eyes bright. "This is exactly what we needed," she said, kissing my cheek. A chance to reconnect. If only she knew. Dinner was a carefully orchestrated affair. I had reserved a private table in a quiet corner of the restaurant, the ambience perfect for a romantic evening, or so it seemed. Claire laughed and sipped her wine, her guard completely down. She even reached across the table to hold my hand, her thumb tracing lazy circles on my skin. I played my role to perfection. I smiled, nodded, and made her believe that this was a simple, loving getaway. Inside, my mind was a storm, calculating every detail for what was to come. After dessert, I leaned forward and said, "There's one more surprise for you tonight." Claire's eyes lit up. "Another surprise? You're spoiling me." Wait here, I said, standing. I'll be back in just a moment. I left her at the table and walked briskly to the lobby. Erica, my private investigator, was waiting there, dressed inconspicuously. She handed me a sealed envelope containing the damning evidence, the photos, the emails, the receipts. Everything. Is he here? I asked her. He checked in earlier, Erica confirmed. Room 312. Your plan is on track. I nodded, thanked her, and returned to the restaurant, the envelope tucked securely under my arm. When I got back to the table, Claire was scrolling through her phone, her expression serene. She looked up and smiled as I approached. Everything okay? She asked. Perfect, I said, handing her the envelope. This is for you. She frowned, confused, and opened it. The moment her eyes landed on the contents, her expression shifted. Confusion turned to shock, then panic. She flipped through the photos, her face growing paler with each one. Mark, she began, her voice trembling. Keep going, I said coldly, leaning back in my chair. You might as well see everything. Her hands shook as she reached the emails, her lips parting in a silent gasp. I can explain, she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. I let out a bitter laugh. Explain. Sure, go ahead. Explain how you spent our anniversary with Nick. Or how you used our joint account to pay for hotels and jewelry for him. Explain how you plan to leave me for a man who doesn't even have the decency to stay faithful to his wife. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, frozen and terrified. I gave you everything, Claire, I continued, my voice low but steady. I trusted you. And this is how you repay me. Mark, please, she choked out. It wasn't. I didn't mean for it to happen. I slammed my hand on the table, startling her. Don't insult me with excuses. You meant for it to happen every single time. You chose this. You chose him. Claire's tears spilled over, her shoulders shaking. I still love you, she sobbed. I swear, I do. It was a mistake. Please, we can fix this. I shook my head slowly. You don't get to rewrite this story, Claire. Not after what you've done. Before she could say anything else, I stood and dropped the final bombshell. Nick's here. Room 312. I invited him. Her face crumpled, her tears turning into full-blown sobs. You didn't. Oh, I did, I said, my tone icy. If you're so desperate to be with him, go ahead. Walk out of here, right now, and go to him. But know this, if you leave this table, you leave me and the kids. For good. Claire sat frozen, her hands clutching the envelope as if it might somehow shield her from the reality crashing down around her. I stared at her for a moment longer, then turned and walked out of the restaurant. I didn't go far. Just to the bar, where I ordered a stiff drink and watched the entrance to the restaurant from a distance. I wanted to see what choice she would make. Would she run to Nick, clinging to the fantasy they'd built together? Or would she stay, begging for a forgiveness I wasn't sure I could give? 15 minutes passed. Then 20. Finally, Claire emerged, her face streaked with tears. But she didn't head toward the elevator or room 312. She walked slowly toward me, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I turned away, finishing my drink in one swallow. She stood beside me, silent, waiting for me to acknowledge her. When I finally did, I saw something I hadn't expected, genuine remorse. I'll fix this, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Whatever it takes, Mark. I'll fix it. I didn't respond. I simply stood, leaving her to follow me back to our suite like a shadow. The night wasn't over, but the battle lines had been drawn. Claire barely spoke as we returned to our suite. The air between us was heavy, suffocating, filled with everything we weren't saying. She sat on the edge of the bed, still clutching the damning envelope as though it could somehow undo everything. I paced the room, my thoughts a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and something I refused to call pity. "How long?" I finally asked, breaking the silence. She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "Mark." "How long, Claire?" I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "Don't make me ask again." She flinched, then lowered her gaze to the floor. "6 months," she whispered. I laughed bitterly, running a hand through my hair. 6 months. 6 months of lying to my face. 6 months of sneaking around behind my back. 6 months of tearing our family apart for what? For him. "It wasn't like that," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "I didn't plan for it to happen. It just—" "Don't you dare say it just happened," I interrupted, my voice rising. "This wasn't some accident, Claire. You didn't trip and fall into his arms. You chose this. Every lie, every text, every hotel room, that was a choice." Her tears started again, but this time I didn't soften. I couldn't. "Why, Claire? Why him? Was I not enough? Was our life not enough?" "You were always enough," she said, her voice breaking. "You are enough. I swear, Mark, it wasn't about you." "Then what was it about?" I demanded, leaning against the wall, glaring at her. "Help me understand, Claire. Because from where I'm standing, you've thrown everything away for nothing." She shook her head, her hands gripping the envelope tighter. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "I was lonely. You were always working, always stressed. And Nick, he made me feel alive again." I let out a harsh laugh. "Alive? That's your excuse. You felt alive while I was here, holding this family together, trusting you?" Her silence was answer enough. The night stretched on, and neither of us slept. I stayed by the window, staring out at the moonlit lake, while Claire remained on the bed, curled into herself. I could feel her gaze on me every so often, but I refused to look at her. I didn't trust myself to speak without exploding again. By morning, I had made my decision. "Pack your things," I said, my voice cold and emotionless. "We're leaving." Claire looked at me, her face pale. "Mark, please. Can't we pack your things?" I repeated, cutting her off. "We're done here." She didn't argue. Maybe she saw the finality in my expression. Maybe she was too drained to fight. Either way, she obeyed, gathering her belongings in silence. I did the same, stuffing clothes into my suitcase with more force than necessary. By the time we checked out, we hadn't exchanged another word. The drive home was a torturous blend of silence and unspoken tension. Claire kept glancing at me, her lips parting as if to speak, only to close again. I didn't give her the chance. I didn't want her apologies or her excuses. I wanted space. Clarity. A way to piece together the fragments of my life without her lies clouding everything. When we pulled into the driveway, Claire hesitated before getting out of the car. "Mark," she began, her voice tentative. "I know I've hurt you. I know I've broken your trust. But please, don't give up on us. Don't give up on our family." I stared straight ahead, my grip on the steering wheel tightening. "You gave up on us the moment you chose him," I said quietly. "This isn't something you can fix with words, Claire. Not this time." She started to cry again, but I didn't wait to watch. I stepped out of the car and headed inside, leaving her to follow or not. It didn't matter to me. Over the next few days, I threw myself into work and the kids, avoiding Claire as much as possible. She tried to bridge the gap, cooking my favorite meals, leaving notes of apology, even attempting to initiate conversations. But I wasn't ready to forgive, and I wasn't sure I ever would be. One evening, as I was putting Sam and Emily to bed, Claire approached me in the hallway. "Mark, can we talk?" she asked, her voice shaky but determined. I sighed, running a hand over my face. "Not now, Claire. Please," she insisted. "I need you to hear me out." Reluctantly, I followed her to the living room, sitting as far from her as possible. She fidgeted with her hands, her eyes darting around the room before finally settling on me. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she began. "I know I've destroyed everything we built. But I'm begging you, Mark, don't throw us away. Don't throw away what we've built." I scoffed. "What we've built? Claire, you're the one who threw it away the moment you decided he was worth more than your family." She flinched but pressed on. "I made a mistake. A terrible, unforgivable mistake. But I love you, Mark. I love our kids. I want to make this right." I shook my head, my chest tight with anger and sadness. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about love, Claire. It's about trust. And you shattered that." Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "I'll do anything, Mark. Anything to prove to you that I'm committed to fixing this." I stood, unable to sit still any longer. "You don't get to decide what happens next, Claire. Not anymore. That's up to me." She looked up at me, her expression desperate. "And what do you want, Mark? What do you need from me?" I stared at her, the weight of her question pressing down on me. "I need time," I said finally. "Time to figure out if I can even look at you without seeing him. Time to decide if this marriage is worth saving." Claire nodded, her shoulders sagging with relief. "Take all the time you need. I'll wait. I'll do whatever it takes." Her words hung in the air, heavy with promises that might never be kept. As I walked away, I couldn't help but wonder if time would be enough to heal the wounds she had left, or if they would scar over, a permanent reminder of what she had destroyed. The days turned into weeks, and our uneasy truce stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. Claire had become a ghost in her own home, moving carefully, as if afraid to disturb the delicate balance. I spent my time with the kids, pouring myself into their routines, their laughter, their innocence, everything that still felt pure and untouched by the chaos Claire had unleashed. But behind the scenes, my plans continued to evolve. I wasn't just treading water. I was orchestrating an ending that would ensure there was no room for further betrayal. It was a crisp Saturday morning when I asked Claire to join me for coffee on the back porch. She seemed hopeful as she brought 2 steaming mugs, her steps light for the first time in weeks. She likely thought this was the beginning of reconciliation. "Thanks," I said, taking the mug she offered and motioning for her to sit. The sun filtered through the trees, casting long shadows over the yard where Sam and Emily were playing. It looked like a perfect day, an illusion I was about to shatter. "I've made a decision," I began, my voice calm, measured. Claire's eyes widened, her hands tightening around her mug. "Okay," she said softly, her tone almost reverent. "I'm ready to hear whatever you have to say." I set my coffee down, leaning forward slightly. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about us, about what's best for the kids, and about what I can live with." She nodded eagerly, her eyes brimming with tears. "Mark, I know I've hurt you more than I can ever repair, but I'll do anything to make this right." "You're right about one thing," I said, my voice hardening. "You've hurt me in ways I never thought possible. But this isn't just about me, Claire. It's about the kids. They deserve stability. They deserve a home free from lies." Claire's face fell, her hands trembling. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying it's over," I replied, standing. "I've already filed for divorce." Her mug slipped from her hands, shattering on the wooden planks of the porch. "No," she gasped, scrambling to her feet. "Mark, please. We can work through this. Don't do this to us. To the kids. I turned to face her, my expression cold. You did this, Claire. You. The moment you decided he was worth more than your family. She sobbed, reaching for me, but I stepped back. Don't, I said firmly. I've already spoken to a lawyer. You'll get the paperwork soon. But the kids, she began. They'll stay here with me, I interrupted. The court will see what I've seen, that I'm the stable parent. You've already proven how easily you can lie, even to them. She sank to her knees, her hands covering her face. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered everything she had taken from me, and the pity evaporated. That night, as Claire locked herself in the guest room to cry, I stayed in my office, going over the last pieces of my plan. Erica, my private investigator, had been worth every penny. Not only had she uncovered Claire's affair, but she had also dug up something even more damning. The next morning, I gathered the kids for breakfast while Claire stayed upstairs. I wanted one last moment of normalcy before the final act. The kids chatted about their favorite cartoons, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just outside their safe little world. After breakfast, I sent them to play and called Claire downstairs. She appeared disheveled, her eyes puffy from crying. What do you want? She asked, her voice hoarse. We need to talk, I said, motioning for her to sit at the kitchen table. She complied reluctantly, her gaze wary. I placed a folder in front of her. There's something you need to see. She hesitated, then opened it. Her eyes scanned the documents inside, photos, bank statements, and most damning of all, a DNA test. Her face turned ashen as she pieced it together. This can't be true, she whispered, her voice trembling. Mark, please, tell me this isn't true. It's true, I said flatly. Nick isn't just your lover. He's also Emily's biological father. Her sobs returned, louder, messier than before. I didn't know, she cried. I swear, Mark, I didn't know. But he did, I said, my voice sharp. He knew, and you knew enough to hide it from me. That's why you kept pushing for the affair, isn't it? To keep him close, to keep the secret buried. I didn't want to hurt you, she sobbed. Don't insult me, I said, standing. This was never about protecting me. It was about protecting yourself. The next week was a blur. The divorce papers were served, and Claire moved out, leaving me with the kids. The court proceedings were swift and brutal. With Erica's evidence and the DNA test, I was awarded full custody of both Sam and Emily. Claire was granted supervised visitation, a concession I made only for Emily's sake. Nick never showed up. He disappeared the moment Claire's lies came to light, leaving her to deal with the wreckage alone. As for me, I moved on. Slowly. Painfully. But with every day that passed, I felt the weight lifting. I had my kids, my home, and my integrity intact. And Claire? She had nothing but the broken pieces of the life she destroyed. In the end, my revenge wasn't just about exposing her lies. It was about reclaiming my life and building something stronger, something unshakable. And I did.